words, a very kind introduction, and a very good question you have posed, which will help me structure my brief opening comments at this plenary session on India's emerging industry and trade architecture. Thank you very much, Mr. Narendran, for setting the context. All the distinguished business leaders and other dignitaries who have joined the VC, ladies and gentlemen. I still remember several years ago when a dear friend, Jiten Doshi in Mumbai, had first talked to me about the Horasis Foundation and what the long-term vision of this foundation was, how we looked at creating an engagement amongst countries where the East plays an important role. And India, with its emerging relevance in the global world, becomes the fulcrum of that engagement. I'm really delighted to see the Horasis India meeting progressing and going from strength to strength. I've had the privilege of addressing you before, and I'd like to compliment CII and Horasis both for this wonderful partnership. COVID-19 has clearly disrupted our way of doing business. In fact, it has affected the whole global trade and global businesses. At this point, I would like to pay my condolences to all those who lost their lives in COVID. But I do hope that with the collective effort of the entire world, focused on expanding the vaccination network, B, containing COVID should there be an eruption, treating it within the protocols that are available, and finally, reorienting our businesses in this new world, the new way of doing business will help us overcome this crisis. In fact, as Prime Minister Modi often says, converting this crisis into an opportunity. In fact, despite all these COVID-19 disruptions, there are clear indications of economic revival in India. I'm sure you're all aware that our foreign direct investment in the COVID year 2021 was the highest ever. Despite the world figures of foreign investments in other countries falling, India was able to attract very high levels of FDI. This year, we are very confident we'll continue this streak of 7 continuous years of historic highs in our foreign investments. Similarly, exports are really looking up. The first quarter of this year, April to June 21, we've had a record $95 billion of exports, something India had never seen ever before. Not even in the fourth quarter of any year, which is typically the year where all of us really put in our best foot forward and expand economic activity. This first quarter, 95 billion, has energized us, and we feel today empowered to lay a target of $400 billion exports for the first time ever, crossing the 400 billion Rubicon this year, 21-22. And with the support of all of you, friends in the room, I'm confident we shall achieve that. In fact, even in July till the 21st of July, our exports are above $22 billion, well poised to cross 32-33 billion by the end of the month, which means our run rate is on track to achieve $400 billion of exports for the first time ever. This includes very good expansion of our engineering goods export. It also has brought us into the top 10 list of agri-produce exporters in the world, and many other sectors which are labor intensive, showing very good traction, very good growth. With this positive momentum, trade policy now needs to be reoriented in the new way the world is working. From ease of doing business to exports, from startups to services, we are taking giant leap in each sector and working in collaboration with industry, working in collaboration with the private sector to find the right set of policies, predictable, stable, helping India be more competitive, helping economic activity stand on its own feet, removing the compliance burden from business, from lives of people, from day-to-day living, removing unnecessary laws, all in all, trying to strengthen India and our position as a preferred destination for industry, investment, and going forward, innovation. This is the result of 30 years, and this is the year we are celebrating 30 years of the opening up of the Indian economy. Very recently, barely 2 weeks back, I went and met Dr. Manmohan Singh, the architect of the original reform package. Today, I would also like to recall the contribution of Prime Minister late Shri P.V. Narasimha Rao, who gave him that opportunity to bring in reforms. Of course, as I saw a piece by Dr. Manmohan Singh, at that time, reform was forced upon us. We had no choice but to open up, given the precarious position of the economy. Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi over the last 7 years has consistently been working to bring about structural changes in the Indian way of working, not out of any compulsion, but out of a deep conviction that India's time has come. It's now time for all of us to prepare ourselves to be relevant in the 21st century, where, I mean, I'm not being astrological when I say it, but I really believe that the world's destiny is going to be shaped by a lot of the decisions that all of you and we take in India. India is going to be that pole around which the world economy will need to grow and expand. And I say this, ladies and gentlemen, because in a number of interactions with ministers across the globe, particularly from the developed world, from large industry groups, both in India and internationally, I get the sense that they all recognize the opportunity lies here. Large amounts of money, a lot of liquidity around the world is chasing opportunity. And that's what attracts them to India. Because India is growing with speed. And when I say we are growing with speed, I'm referring to stability, productivity, enterprise, entrepreneurship, and demand. Truly, where is the demand? It's 1.3 billion Indians aspiring for a better quality of life. That is the demand of tomorrow. The entrepreneurial spirit you see in India, more than 15 unicorns in the last 6 months alone. Are young boys and girls not wanting to be job seekers, but job creators? That's true entrepreneurship. Our industry engaging with the world market with confidence, that's enterprise. India in the COVID period, working from home with all the difficulties around a pandemic about which nobody knows anything. We've been able to sustain economic activity, get back to normalcy very quickly, recovered nearly 93% of our economy, got it back despite the very strict lockdown in the first quarter required to prepare the nation to face this pandemic, and demonstrating that through improved productivity, improved processes, we'll be able to remain competitive and be a part of global businesses from a position of strength. And clearly, thanks to the people of India with 2 consecutive mandates of an absolute majority, first time ever after probably 1984, I think India and the people of India have spoken about their confidence in Prime Minister Modi, the stability that he brings to Indian politics, and the stability of economic policy that we have witnessed in the last few years. We have embarked on the path of Atmanirbhar Bharat, a self-reliant, self-sufficient, self-confident India. And as Prime Minister Modi says, Atmanirbharta is not about lesser engagement with the world. We want to expand the engagement with the world. We want to open our doors wider to be a part of the world economy. We want trade to flourish both sides. We want services to grow internationally. We want trade barriers from both sides to be removed. It cannot be that one part of the world, through various means, creates non-tariff barriers, but demands an opening up of the other part of the world. Atmanirbharta, to my mind, is the recipe for rebuilding India, revitalizing India, and rebuilding resilience in our economy. Ladies and gentlemen, today I would like to share with you a little bit about the last 2 years of active engagement with the rest of the world, where we are currently in dialogue with 16 countries, and in some cases groups of countries, to look at greater degree of bilateral trade in goods and services, working towards early harvest agreements which will allow us to quickly identify areas of mutual interest and progress our negotiations faster towards a comprehensive economic partnership towards free trade agreements. While for any country working on 16 agreements simultaneously is not easy, we have focused our efforts to a few very promising agreements where I can see clearly huge comparative advantages for India to get market access and the ability to trade both in goods and services in a much bigger way. The United Kingdom, the European Union, Canada, Australia, the UAE, all of these are countries with whom we can very quickly expand our discussions, our engagement, look for the low-hanging fruits, look for areas which are labor-intensive like our agri-exports, our textile sector, our engineering goods, our automobile sector, and then, of course, our evergreen services sector. I think this kind of focused energy that Prime Minister Modi has directed his government to put into bringing in a greater degree of self-confidence that we can engage with the world, but with that part of the world where there's transparency in operation, business processes, policy, economic activity is not opaque, and we get a fair deal on the principle of reciprocity. We have recently announced the production-linked incentive in several sectors to create national champions. These sectors where we can clearly see an edge both to meet the entire Indian demand and with growing economies of scale become competitive in the world will help us revolutionize our manufacturing activity. About $26 billion of production-linked incentives covering 13 sectors are going to be paid out in the next 5 to 6 years. I believe PLI is not only production linked incentive, it is a powerhouse of leading industrial growth in the post-COVID world. I do believe the world is looking at India as a trusted partner today. The world wants India in their resilient supply chains. Just like Australia, Japan, and India started the Resilient Supply Chain Initiative, many other countries in the world are engaging with us to look at sourcing in a greater way, in a bigger way, from India, making India their partner towards progress, towards competitive international businesses. And we in the government are working towards ensuring a transparent, dependable, and reliable ecosystem in India, be it through the effort I'm doing on I often say, genuine single window, where all of you can sit in your office, maybe work from home, and get everything done online without ever having to go around government offices, just like I had to do 30 years ago when I started my first small scale industry. I remember every one of those experiences. I remember every one of those often humiliating experiences. And I promise you, we are doing our best. And I'm scratching my memory to remember every little detail of what I went through, what many of you went through, what many of our young boys and girls go through when they want to venture into their entrepreneurial journey, to see how we can make a difference, to see how we can provide an enabling environment to help Indian enterprise flourish, grow, expand, take India across the world, make India a recognized brand. But in all of this, I assure you, transparency, integrity, and honesty will be rewarded very, very deeply. In a recent engagement with YPO, somebody asked me that, we feel very hassled about agencies coming and troubling us. I said, look, the agencies are not troubling you. It's unfortunately the legacy issues which are troubling you. It's unfortunately some actions of the past which are causing distress. Our effort is to move the nation to an honest and very, very transparent way of working, so that nobody in the future, and your and my children in the future, don't have to go through the kind of business environment that some of us had suffered in the past. Our effort is that when a person, a young boy or girl, graduates from college, his mindset doesn't go the wrong way. His mindset is trained to think honestly. His mindset is trained to be very, very, if I can use a word of what the youngsters use, very cool about his way of working. Because he doesn't have to worry about intimidating and harassing government processes or business environment. I mean, just yesterday, somebody came to me, said they want to set up a testing lab, I think he was mentioning. And he wanted approval for that testing lab. And probably being a person of the old school of thinking, maybe not realizing as much as how things have changed, he didn't know that we have already outsourced the entire activity of approval of testing labs. It's a completely online process now. Doesn't need any minister to interfere. It's all on the website. He just needs to apply, satisfy that he meets the requirements of a recognized testing lab. That process is also done by NABL, an organization whose leadership is in the hands of the private sector. Adil Zainul Bhai, an ex-McKinsey chief of India, runs the Quality Council of India, under which NABL is. And the entire effort is to get government out of your life, out of your business. So I'm just sharing this small example because I do believe that things have changed. Things are changing very fast in India. And this new energy that I see in the country are the key to India's transformation in the future. The national mood has changed. People are becoming more and more conscious about their rights and their obligations. And I do believe we are poised for a very, very great future going forward. There are a lot of emerging opportunities in the short term: pharma products, our vaccines, our ICT related goods and services, textiles. Lot of good opportunities in the short term, lot of great opportunities in the long term. Digitization, clean energy, our foray into high-tech industry like semiconductors, GVCs, many sector-specific opportunities in textiles, shipping, engineering services, marine products, electronics. Lots to be done, ladies and gentlemen. Lots of ambitions, lots of goals, lots of dreams to be met, a lot of commitment to fulfill, a lot of effort we all have to put in. But I am confident that today, as we stand together with a strong resolve, united for a single cause of building a strong India for tomorrow, no power on earth can stop India, whose time has come. As Swami Vivekananda once said, when an idea exclusively occupies the mind, it is transformed into an actual physical state. Friends, let us take this resolve. Let us all collectively decide that with our collective energy, with the buoyancy we see, with the positivity in the market, in the country today, we will use this opportunity, work together, put in our best effort, and make India become a superpower again. Help our young boys and girls achieve what is truly destined for our next generation. Thank you very much for this opportunity. And I do wish all of you good health and a very, very productive engagement through this CII Horasis conference. And may your businesses and your lives prosper in the days to come. Thank you, Sim.
Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Thank you very much. Honorable Minister, with your permission, if we can have just a couple of questions and comments from your, based on what one is receiving, of course, based on what you said. And you alluded to the 30 years of reforms, and India has come a long way since then. And you also enjoy, if I may say, a very strong a government with a phenomenal strong mandate, and therefore it gives you, I would believe, a phenomenal power, if I can say, to carry forward reforms at this point in time, to make those announcements, which many of which you spoke about, that some big important steps that has been taken. But as we go ahead, there are other big areas that one would like to look from India, people which we have definitely not touched, because we don't want to touch those areas, be it labor, be it land. Your government started working on the labor reforms. In a noisy democracy like India, there is always a pushback. But you run most of the states in the country now, and these are reforms at this point in time. Many of the reforms are really related to the states of the country rather than the central reforms as we go forward. How will you ensure that this leadership which has been taken by the center gets translated into the states, which will actually make India so very competitive and engage with the world so much strongly? Can't the party, your party, which rules so many states in India, can they take the leadership of making those reforms happen in the states? What's the way forward, sir? Something that we really wanted to hear from you and your perspectives.
Thank you, CB. In fact, you hit the nail on the head. There's a lot that we desire to do. That's a lot that's in the pipeline, both at the central government and in several of the states run by us. You alluded to labor reform. While we have already passed a law to combine all the various debilitating labor laws into 4 codes, which will also give a lot more flexibility to the Indian labor market and actually expand the labor market, expand job opportunities. While we are negotiating and finalizing issues, and you know how it can be with the unions, we have all worked with unions. We've all had to bring everybody and bring a greater degree of consensus. And the labor laws were actually a result of extensive deliberations with unions amongst political parties and have by and large been welcomed by all. But at the same time, several states, Uttar Pradesh, for example, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, they've already done large part of that reform within the state. So it's a two-way track that we are working on. Our states on their own are pushing the reform agenda. We at the center are trying to create the national consensus to bring it in. But I must share with you, sometimes we often, sometimes we just go about the same complaint, if I may use the word, about an issue which may not necessarily be on the ground. I've been a minister now 7 years, Mr. Banerjee. I have yet to meet one person, I promise you, not one industrialist or businessman who came to me and said that because of labor laws, we are not investing in India or our businesses are suffering. The last that I heard of a problem of labor was the Windstorm factory one, but there it was a contractor not paying the workers full wages. And as principal employer, the company, probably being a foreign company, did not realize its obligations. They should, now they have realized that they have to supervise and ensure that even contract labor gets paid. And all of us in India know that. As principal employer, we have to ensure that. Other than that, if you look back, many years ago, there was a problem in Maruti. And even more, looking back probably a decade ago, a problem in Bajaj Auto. I have not heard of labor problem in India in the last 10 years, so much so that it could become a deterrence. Narendran is here, the largest industrial group in the country. I have not heard of a single instance of a problem. Of course, they're a fantastic employer. But by and large, you be fair, labor will never be a problem for you. Similarly, land. I have, 22,000 hectares of land in the industrial parks alone under NICTEC. We took out a database of the land available in the states and the center. It runs into lakhs of acres. Land available for setting up new industry businesses. It's possible that for a particular business at a point of time in a particular area, there may be some resistance. It's often politically motivated or often not really marketed well or explained well. So there may be some instances. But otherwise, today, land, labor, capital with so many venture capital and other private investors, banks, much stronger than ever before, having cleaned up most of the balance sheet. So I think land, labor, capital, these are issues which we could discuss maybe 10 years, 5 years ago or something. Today, we've been able to bring all of that to a little bit of stable picture. And if anybody has a problem, I'm always there. My doors are open.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's very, very reassuring. And yes, your doors are indeed has always been open for the industry and for everyone. And that's been a hallmark of this government. And I must say that with the experience that first one has had. Before I end this session, we cannot but talk about what's going on in the world, and in India is no exception, COVID. And sometimes, more often than not, probably, we get a raw deal in the way things are seen. When it comes to, say, for instance, vaccination, people look at the percentage vaccinated, not the numbers vaccinated in India. That's the raw deal that we get. And vaccinating in India is a huge challenge. We have a population of 1.3 billion, and we are doing our best. But the economy depends a lot. After the first wave, we turned around pretty much well. After the second wave, we turned around even faster. But we want to prevent the third wave. We want to, and vaccination would be one area to see how we can really mitigate the challenges that come through a third wave. So the world would like to know, and it will be great to understand from you, Honorable Minister, what's India doing in terms of vaccination? What's the story? How is the story evolving? How happy are you with the progress? And how do you think that you will be able to deal with any other economic challenge that might come our way in the months to come?
Well, you've hit the nail on the head. Vaccination is very critical to our turnaround. And actually, India should be proud. All of you should be proud that we are the world's largest vaccinator, if I may use the word today. 42 crore or 43 crore vaccines already administered. Our run rate is now 12 crores or so every month, soon to become 15 crores in the next 1 or 2 months, and possibly go up to 20 crores by the end of the year, calendar year, per month. So by December, almost every adult would have had a single dose. And most of us would have had second dose also. So I think this is something India should actually be proud about, rather than demeaning ourselves. Leave alone the politicians, of course. That's a different story. But look at the other part. When vaccination started, recall the vaccine hesitancy. Even today in Delhi, which is a very enlightened city, 20% of the frontline workers who started getting vaccinated 6 months ago are not yet vaccinated. 20% of frontline workers. Even today, there's a lot of places where there is vaccine hesitancy. Look at the private sector. You all demanded, and I remember how much you all fought with me on VCs, including the day we announced opening up for the private sector, that afternoon or that evening, that open it up, let the private sector do it. We did open it up. You're not even buying all those 25% vaccines. CII should take a lead and get all of you to ensure that you take those 25% vaccines. And you had all said, we will do, one industrial group said, I will do 1 crore vaccines. Another said, we'll go to remote areas, rural areas, and we'll do it. Nobody has gone to Bihar. Nobody has gone to the Northeast. Nobody has gone to Jharkhand or Chhattisgarh to run campaigns to remove hesitancy and use the 25% that's available for the private sector. States made a clamor, allow us to run our own vaccination plans, import it. Prime Minister allowed it. Then they started screaming, why did you leave it to us, center's responsibility? We took it back. So it's a responsive government you're dealing with. I mean, I can almost say you guys are driving our agenda. So we are going along with you, but please also then calibrate what you are asking and then fulfill once you get what you are demanding. But don't worry, our government is committed to provide a free vaccine to everybody eligible, irrespective of whether the private sector does take your 25% quota or no. We will ensure everybody gets vaccinated. We are, of course, strengthening the ecosystem of hospitals, ICU beds, ventilators, oximeters, then the 1,500 plus PSA plants, pressure swing absorption plants that are being set up all over the country. The Tata Trusts are doing an excellent job in strengthening medical infrastructure all over the country, and many other philanthropic organizations. I compliment all of them. I particularly have a word of, I must mention, for the steel industry and the refineries, that in the second wave, they were absolutely fantastic. That's truly the symbol of private sector and government working hand in hand to serve the people of India. Steel plants cut down their production to be able to give more medical oxygen to the people and the hospitals who needed it. Refineries scaled up their liquid medical oxygen. One refinery in Gujarat, which used to make barely 100, had a capacity of 100 tons of oxygen, liquid oxygen a day, ramped it up to 1,100 tons within a span of 30 days, and are now looking at ramping it up to 2,500. And the story is the same in every aspect. Testing, rapid testing, PPEs, masks, medicines, oxygen, hospital infrastructure, ventilators, ICU beds, you name the thing. India's transformation or growth in all of these cannot be calculated in percentages, 10, 20, 30, 50, 100. You only have to calculate it in exponential terms. Testing from 2,500 to 25 lakhs a day. PPE kits from zero to a net exporter to the whole world. Medicines, the world looking up to India as the pharmacy of the world. Today, even rapid testing kits, we are exporting. Oxygen, from 700 or 900 metric tons of liquid medical oxygen per day, ramped up to 8,900 per day. 10x. No country in the world, no country, I dare say, has been able to do that. Vaccination. The developed world, and of course, then the politicians will come and say, look at the percentage. Obviously, we have 1.3 billion people. The United Kingdom has 60 million. Now, you compare the percentages, it's quite irrational if you ask me. But given the scale of the challenge, I'm proud of all of you. Every single Indian has stood up to that challenge. And collectively, under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi, we will emerge victorious both out of COVID. God forbid the third wave does come. We are confident we can face it squarely. We can save lives. We can save our people's future. We can save our economy. And we'll emerge as the beacon of light for the rest of the world. Thank you very much, Siddhi.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. One last point that I'd like to come to. And before I do that, I'll just also request Naren, if you would also like to respond to the Honorable Minister's call that how CII and industry would collaborate with and assist in this huge program that we have in front of us of vaccination. But my last question to both of you, Naren, and I will request the Honorable Minister for the closing comments. But one big area today which concerns the world, and India again has shown leadership, and Honorable Minister himself in his earlier avatars have shown phenomenal leadership. This is in the area of environment and sustainability. And I'd like to just say that we actually see sustainability not just as a compulsion, but also as a huge business opportunity, Naren, given the imperatives for green products, green energy, green businesses. And Indian companies, yours and others, have a notable uptake in becoming sustainable. What more can be done in this regard, and what could be some of the challenges ahead, Naren? And I request the Minister to kindly tell us also in conclusion after Naren as to what does India see? It has shown its leadership. Now what next? Because we have such great challenges, and that's a very, very important global issue. And in fact, it will also affect trading between countries very strongly as we go forward. Naren, on the response on the vaccine and thereafter on the environment, please.
Thanks, Siddhi, and thanks, Mr. Minister. I think your point is very valid. I don't think private sector's picked up the 25% that is available. That I agree totally. But I think CI has been doing a lot of work on this. Many of our members have been picking up and working in the communities, which are around their places of operation. We are doing a campaign also on vaccine hesitancy. We are fully conscious that this hesitancy is a big challenge, particularly in semi-urban and rural India. So we are working, we have a team working on it, and we work with many of the media houses to get some free time to communicate this. Plus, we are also very conscious that in many parts of semi-urban and rural India, we need to work with local influencers to get this addressed. We are also working in specific states. Odisha, for instance, we've done a lot of work along with the public sector and private sector and the government. And Mr. Pradhan at that time was pushing us on that. So we were doing a lot of work there. And we are working in multiple states. We met the Honorable Health Minister the other day, CB and me, and he also talked to us about Northeast. So we are working on Northeast as well. So I think CII is committed to work and make sure that many of our members take it forward. I know that our southern region has done a lot of work with our MSME members and done a lot of camps there as well. And similarly across multiple states. So we take your point and we will certainly push that forward. Coming to CV's point on sustainability and climate change, I think it's a big challenge. And I think my submission to you is, we need to have policy evolve at the pace at which we expect industry to change, because globally policy is evolving. And as you saw from the announcements from the EU, even over the last few days, there's a carbon border adjustment mechanism. There are incentives being given to industry to transition, because the cost of transition and the complexity of transition is beyond what industry alone can handle. So, industry, government, and customers, because customers also need to be willing to pay more for green products. So I think between industry, customers, and government, we need to work together to manage this transition. It's a great opportunity for us in India. I think renewables is an area where we are already moving very aggressively. But I think on hydrogen, I think whether it's on many other dimensions of it, whether it's carbon capture and storage, I think on many other areas, there is a need for us to work closely with the government. And I think, as you may be aware, and as I may have mentioned to you, sustainability is an important part of our theme for this year in CII, and we'll engage with the government on this. Over to you, Mr. Minister.
Sir, I know that this is a subject of your passion, therefore wanted to end with this particular.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And before I respond to that, I must compliment CII and Horasis. And if Mr. Jürgen Richter is on the call, please convey to him my compliments for having sustainably taken the Horasis agenda forward. And while listening to CB, I was just looking at your whole event details. It's a remarkable set of subjects. I think if you make a document out of all that was discussed in this, it could actually become an agenda-setting document. So my compliments to all of you gentlemen, ladies, who have kept this fire in the belly live to make Horasis CII partnership a grand success. So I just wanted to really compliment all of you. Thank you, Mr. Narendran, for enlightening us about the good work CII and all of you are doing. I'm delighted that you're going to pick up the Northeast also. Maybe a little note sent on what actions and activities you're doing will help more of us in government be educated about these initiatives and help us appreciate it even in public. Gentlemen, ladies, the agenda of sustainability is not something that's foisted on us by international pressure or by various COP 20, 21, 22. Now we're going to have the 26th COP at Glasgow in the UK. It's, as Prime Minister Modi says, it's an article of faith for every Indian. For centuries, probably from mythological times, respect for the nature comes naturally. For us, God resides in nature. And therefore, protecting nature, protecting the environment is something we should have actually been much more focused on over our last 70-year journey of independent India. I remember when Vice President Al Gore came out with the inconvenient truth, Prime Minister, then Chief Minister of Gujarat, responded in a very nice manner with his own understanding of the subject. Convenient action. Because end of the day, we all know the truth. convenient, inconvenient, bad, good. We knew that truth always. The world needs to now act. And I must share with you, at the COP21 in Paris, I had the privilege to be a part of the discussions there. And clearly, India led from the front. The role of India in bringing the entire world together was remarkable. Prime Minister Modi was there for 24 hours, but those were 24 defining hours to make COP21 a success. If I can share a very personal anecdote with all of you, I don't know if I've done it before, but just before President Obama and Prime Minister Modi were to have their bilateral, before the main session where the agreement was adopted, Prime Minister Modi was called into another meeting with the Japanese Prime Minister, which was of an urgent nature. And we had to reschedule President Obama's meet by about half an hour. Prakash Javadekar, the then Environment Minister, and I, we both reached, of course, early so that we would be there before anybody else. And to our surprise, President Obama also came early, came half an hour before the scheduled time. He was to be in the holding room, as you're all aware, but he stepped out of that, came into where Prakash ji and I were standing in the passageway outside. And ladies and gentlemen, he actually is a tall, imposing personality. He had one hand on Prakash ji's shoulder, another on my shoulder. And for almost 20-25 minutes, he was sharing with us how the US looks for India's leadership to make COP21 a success. They could clearly see in Prime Minister Modi that leader who believes in environment, intrinsically believes in the environment, in sustainability, how important the challenge of climate change is, not only to the developed world, but to the entire world. And therefore, India stands committed to engaging with sustainability, to a better future for our children. As they say, we have inherited the world or the planet, we have inherited the planet as trustees. And it is expected of us to leave behind the world in a better way than what we inherited. And saving the planet, saving the world is a collective responsibility of all countries. Sadly, the developed world has not lived up to their commitments. Sadly, the developed world, for all the promises made at COP21, has abysmally failed to fulfill any of them, to the extent that amongst the G20 countries also, India is amongst the only countries which has met, rather exceeded, all our nationally determined contributions. We are regularly providing the UNFCCC our biannual report on all the actions taken and the outcomes of our actions post COP21. Not many countries are doing that. Most developed world also is not doing that, ladies and gentlemen. But India remains steadfast in its commitment. And as all of you, or many of you may be aware, whether it is energy efficiency, our LED program, the Ujala program, we are a world leader. No country in the world has a program as large as run by India on the LED adoption. I suspect you won't find an incandescent bulb CB in any store today. If at all, it could be in an antique store and would probably today cost 600 rupees, which was the original price of LEDs 6 years ago, but which would now be available at 40, 50 rupees, running for 7 years, 10 years, by the best technologies and companies in the world. Similarly, on renewable energy, we brought in scale to solar energy, to wind, to our future work with electric vehicles, where Tata is a very important stakeholder. Our work with hydrogen technologies, the blue hydrogen, the green hydrogen, which we are now getting into working with industry in partnership. So truly, I assure all of you, ladies and gentlemen, we are committed to a sustainable future. We recognize deeply how important it is to clean our environment. That is why our focus and our thrust on ethanol blending in petrol, bringing down our import bill, not only to save foreign exchange, but clean up the environment. In the railways, we have gone in for 100% electrification of railways program by December 23. You all can be proud that your railway, the Indian Railway, is 100% run on electricity, saving millions of tons of carbon emissions and billions of dollars of precious foreign exchange. And by 2030, you will be the proud owner of the world's first large railway system, which will be net zero. I know corporations around the world are adopting net zero with certain deadlines. We would probably be the first country in the world where a public undertaking like the railways, a utility like the railways, will become net zero at the scale and dimension at which the Indian Railways function. And I can go on and on. You all know it's a subject I'm very passionate about. I can read out from my mind probably a few thousand initiatives at different points going on, which collectively will truly change the future of India, move us towards respect for sustainability, and show the world the way forward. But once again, thank you for this excellent opportunity. Thank you for this fantastic program you have put together. And my compliments to all the participants. Looking at the various participants of all the various programs, I'm now eagerly looking forward to physical meetings, because while we all enjoyed the increased efficiency of VCs and virtual meetings, I think I'm missing that personal connect now. I'm missing that handshake. I'm missing the body language. I'm missing that energy that comes from meeting each other, from sharing ideas, from that open conversation. I mean, right now I've been speaking, nobody interrupted me. I love it when somebody interrupts me to correct me, to expand on what I'm saying, to improve what I'm saying. That energy has to be brought back. I pray and wish we can all get back to that quickly. Stay safe, stay healthy. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Honorable Minister. Thanks for spending and rather even going beyond your scheduled time. I must tell you that Frank Richter is pretty much viewing it, but he has chosen to be viewing it in the gallery rather than coming onto the screen. And I'm sure he is most excited and honored to hear your very nice words and compliments. Great overview, Honorable Minister, of what's happening in the economy, what's happening on the trade front, what's happening on the reforms front, and also the way forward. It's extremely encouraging to know this, and this gives phenomenal confidence of all of us, especially those who are not from India, confidence in our country. And thanks for your leadership, thanks for your partnership, thanks for your vision, and thanks for telling us how we can go ahead together in making everything that you said a great success in the future. So thank you very much, Honorable Minister, for this participation.
Thank you.
Naren, for being here, and thanks to the great audience and for your lovely participation. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.